Kyle Larson may have already won Throwback weekend. Another significant track change has some drivers up in arms. And Dover this weekend, let's crunch the numbers. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove. They've done it. Finally, at long last, Kyle Larson is throwing it back to two-time NASCAR Cup Series champion Texas Terry Labonte. The number 5 car will wear these iconic Kellogg's colors at Darlington Raceway next month. This is beautiful and a long time coming. I guess the timing was perfect this year with it being Hendrick Motorsports' 40th anniversary and all. Terry Labonte won the 1996 championship in a Hendrick car with Kellogg's as his primary sponsor. Very recognizable colors, one of my all-time favorite paint schemes, well executed. Cool to see Larson reveal the scheme in front of Terry Labonte on FS1 last night. Well done. It's going to be tough for another throwback scheme to top this one. Hey, the bar has been set. Now, before we bring in NASCAR analytics expert Greg Mathern to talk Dover, new curbing has been installed entering the bus stop at Watkins Glen. This was the first photo I saw shared today showing off those new, they're basically ramps. We're going to see cars launching into the bus stop or riding on 2 wheels like stadium super trucks. My first reaction was, why? The bus stop is one of the most iconic sections of any track on the NASCAR schedule. Why change it? Connor Zilisch, young racer, agrees. He tweeted, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it." Parker Kligerman responded, "Oh no, Watkins Glen, what have you done?" We've got a truck/ARCA driver upset with this change. We've got an Xfinity Series driver upset with this change. But Kyle Larson, a Cup Series driver, voiced his support for this change on social media. He posted, "This is my mouthpiece data from last year through the bus stop. Something needed to be done. What was there before was not safe for the brain. Hopefully this is better." A number of drivers at different tracks will wear these mouthpieces to measure G-forces, especially in the case of a crash, but I don't think we've ever seen the actual chart, the actual data shared like this. If I'm reading this correctly, it appears that last year, anytime Kyle Larson went through the bus stop, went over the curbs, he was experiencing nearly 12 Gs of force, sometimes peaking as high as 18 Gs going over those curbs, rattling around. That is pretty significant. We've heard other drivers talk about, 50, 60 plus Gs being felt during, head-on crashes with the outside wall, but that's a one-time crash. Going over those curbs 70, 80, 90 times a race, 18 Gs, that starts to add up over time. No wonder Kyle Larson is supporting this change. I haven't seen or heard any other Cup Series drivers talk about this, but NASCAR did confirm to reporter Toby Christie that they saw that an abnormally large number of incidents were triggered in this area. NASCAR putting these larger curbs there is meant to deter drivers from going over the curbs at all, stay more on the traditional racing surface. Reporter Bob Pocker says that they may put a different type of curb or rumble strip down. It'll all depend on the results of a tire test in June. NASCAR citing driver safety as the reason for this change. Watkins Glen is a NASCAR-owned track. Kyle Larson's data he just shared seems to support their decision. I don't really have a super strong opinion here. I agree with Connor Zilisch. The bus stop really wasn't broken from a racing and action standpoint. But now with these large curbs, this will force drivers likely to slow down a bit more entering the bus stop. Who knows? That could open the door for more passing opportunities, especially on the Cup Series side. So maybe this will actually be a good change and actually promote more action, more passing. We can only hope. I'm not a huge fan of putting big curbs there next to the racing groove that could damage race cars, but at the same time, I wasn't really a fan of COTA, where drivers were handed penalties for going an inch or two offline. Having an actual physical deterrent there, that might be what needs to happen. Share your thoughts down in the comment section below. Undoubtedly, this is a result of the next-gen car being just a bit stiffer, more rigid than the Xfinity Series cars, the Gen 6. It's more like a sports car, and you don't see IMSA driving up over the curbs as often as NASCAR does. Leave your reaction down in the comment section below. Now let's talk Dover. Could this be a great opportunity for a Ross Chastain, maybe an Alex Bowman to break through and get to victory lane? Let's take a deep dive into the numbers ahead of this weekend's race at the Monster Mile. I'm now joined by Greg Mathern from wintherace.info, NASCAR betting and analytical expert. Greg, it's great to see you. Dover this weekend, the Monster Mile, quite literally its own beast, because we don't know what to expect this weekend, and there's not really any other track on the schedule anything like Dover. So, from your perspective, when trying to come up with algorithms and models, trying to analyze the data, what data can you refer to when trying to make accurate predictions for a race like this?
Yeah, so it's great to be here, Eric. I mean, it is, as you said, it's its own thing, and it's a very hard track to figure out what exactly it is. The comps are just not there. It's the concrete surface. We can see that if we go look at Bristol. We can see that if we look at Nashville, but those are two very, very different tracks.
Yeah.
Bristol kind of has the same banking, but it's basically half the length of Dover. When we look at how we're trying to analyze this and kind of pick our, guys from the past couple of years, what we've looked at is Vegas 1 has actually been incredibly predictive. This year we've got a little bit more. We've got Bristol, we've got Texas, which are both running the same package. Texas is so wildly different, though. I don't think we're going to learn much there. So we are going to look at Bristol, though. But Dover is the comp to Dover, right? We want to look back and see how drivers have performed here, what they've been doing here, and then we'll, pull in a little bit of the current year, how you did earlier on the intermediate package, just to give us a little more data to work with here.
Yeah, on my end, just kind of studying recent results at Dover. It's interesting you mentioned Las Vegas. That could bode well if you're a Kyle Larson or maybe a Tyler Reddick fan. They showed a lot of speed earlier this year. But when I look at recent Dover winners, it's usually the guys who are fast all year long. Like last year, Martin Truex Jr. won at Dover on a Monday. He went on to win the regular season championship. Chase Elliott, the year before, won 5 races that season, was in the championship 4. The year before that, it was a Hendrick 1, 2, 3, 4. I think half the championship 4 that year was Hendrick cars. 2020, Harvick and Hamlin won the 2 Dover races. They were the winningest drivers all season long. So this track seems to favor the fastest overall drivers and teams. So I'm not sure we'll see an upset winner. Let's just jump straight to the favorites, I guess. I look at Martin Truex Jr. as the defending race winner, the Truex sweep 1 year ago. William Byron, Hendrick often fast here. But is there a driver up near the top of the list that you are keeping your eye on?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, the cars that are fast are the cars that are fast, and we're going to see that. This is a just, give me some speed. The other thing, though, is it is a track that drivers who perform well here. So we want to look at some of that. And jumping out on that is Ross Chastain.
Oh, yeah.
He has been the most consistent driver here in the Gen 7 car. He has had a driver rating of 125.2 and 129.5 the past 2 years. He's had almost all of his laps basically inside the top 10 both years. He's
Wow.
right around 88% of his laps inside the top 10. And he's led 85 and 98 laps the past 2 years. So he's up front, he's leading laps, and he's been incredibly consistent both years. So we look at him, and he's shown a little bit of speed earlier in this year. So I think Ross Chastain is definitely one that I'm keeping an eye on.
I like it.
When I look at his odds right now, he's down to about 8-1 most places. Not interested in betting him at that price, but earlier this week we saw some 10-1s, and if you see something back in that range, definitely worth being interested in. Kyle Larson is the odds-on favorite at every book, right? And it's hard to know what we're going to see with him, though. He's had incidents both years here. He's had fast cars, and then he's just had problems. He had a tire blowout in 22, and then last year he had his little incident with Ross where, he then got plowed into and ended his day. So, I think we're going to look at him, certainly not at where he is right now in terms of odds, though.
Yeah, Kyle Larson absolutely going to be fast, but I like that Ross Chastain pick. I kind of forgot that he's been a consistent top 5 threat here the past couple of years. Hopefully Trackhouse, their speed is where they need it to be. If we have to try and reach and find some drivers that may be flying under Miles the Monster's radar, who do you got? Is there anyone that jumps off the page at you? Because I'll be honest, I was scrambling trying to find someone lower on the list that stood out to me.
Yeah, the biggest kind of surprise to me when I was going over the stats is Ricky Stenhouse Jr.
Okay.
He is a sneaky good driver at this track. I do an incident adjusted speed metric that tries to account for when, things like what happened to Kyle Larson, blows a tire or something, to try and filter some of that stuff out to just focus on, what your actual speed when you have a healthy car is. And in 2022, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was seventh in my incident adjusted speed metric here. He finished second that year, was running, his finish was better than his running position, but even his running position that year was 8.88. He was a little bit slower last year, but still had a, strong car, a good finish. And when we look back across his history here, he consistently kind of pops up right around that top 10 range. And I think for a driver that, a lot of people peg as hey, he's a super speedway racer, I think that's probably surprising. This is one of those tracks that he just seems to have kind of figured out. And when he doesn't run into incidences, he's going to be up around the top 10.
Yeah, a big if, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. can stay out of trouble. It's been a tough start to the year, but coming off a strong top 5 finish at Talladega, maybe some good momentum heading his way. I guess lastly, Greg, we've talked a lot about who's going to win. Stenhouse may not fall into that category, but maybe he falls into an interesting top 10 or top 5 pick, maybe a good value pick for folks playing fantasy. Are there any other drivers out there that you'd like to at least crack the top 10 on Sunday?
Yeah, well, so Stenhouse is definitely one that I'm going to be looking at for fantasy, kind of depending on how we see practice and how we see qualifying. His top at 10 odds right now are not where I'm interested, but there are some other ones that are kind of in that range that are still interesting. Chris Buescher is another one who kind of surprised me when I started looking at the data. He is actually second most top 10 laps over the past 2 years here, behind only Ross Chastain.
Wow.
He's had 709 of his 800 laps here over the past 2 years inside the top 10. He's got an average running position of 7.83. That's fourth best in the series. And if we take out Bowman, who only has one, that moves him up to third best. That said, it's really interesting. His fall off between top 10 and top 5 is massive. Massive, massive, massive. He's only got 129 laps in the top 5, and that's 11th best. In fact, that's actually behind Bowman, and Bowman only has the one race.
Wow.
So, in 2 years, he has less laps inside of the top 5 than Bowman has. That said, his top 10 odds are actually still really enticing, given how strong he's been in that range. If I look over at Bet365, BetRivers, and ValleyBet, we can get him at 100 plus 110 for a top 10 on those books. And if you happen to have Hard Rock or MGM, you can get plus 120 on those. So for a guy who's been the second most laps inside the top 10, I think that's just wildly mispriced. I'm very interested there. The other one who's interesting is Bowman. He only has one race here in the Gen 7. He was, out last year with the injury. But this has been a track that he has been really good at. This is one of those tracks, again, we talk about guys who just kind of have it figured out. This is one of those tracks Bowman has figured out. Since joining Hendrick, his first 2 finishes weren't great, 23, 28. Since then, 2, 3, 25, 5, 1, and 5. And that 25, he got damaged on lap 7, fell back to 38, and then came back up and was still able to, have a mid-20s finish for a car that was just absolutely trashed and had been destroyed. So I look at him, we're getting top 5 odds on him at Bet Rivers at plus 275. I really like that bet, even as low as 250. I think that's an interesting bet because this is, again, just a guy who kind of has this track figured out and has really strong history here.
Yeah, I'm glad we made it through this segment and mentioned Alex Bowman. Worth a mention anytime we come to Dover. Again, led that 1, 2, 3, 4 Hendrick Motorsports finish a few years back. Only his second race in the next-gen car, hoping he has a strong run out there. A lot of good stuff once again this week, Greg. Great data, great analytics. Really appreciate you sharing some of that insight with us. WinTheRace.info, you can find more of Greg's work. Also, DailyDownForce.com. You'll see some of Greg's work as well. Greg, thank you so much for being on the show. And we'll talk to you again real soon.
Always a pleasure. Thanks.
Big thank you again to Greg for coming on the show. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. We talk NASCAR every single day. And a big thank you, as always, to my very generous Patreon supporters. Have a wonderful rest of your day, folks. I will see you again real soon. Take care, y'all.